Hey, what's up, everyone? This is the KMN 1971 back with another edition of my comic book collection spotlight series. This time around, the spotlight falls upon my top 50 indie comics in my PC. After watching Vin Cruz's top 50 of his indie comics probably a month or so ago, planted the seed in my head that I wanted to throw a video like that together myself. So thank you, Vin Cruz, for showing that video. Now, when I was trying to compile my top 50, it was impossible just to narrow it down to 50. So I do have some honorable mentions, which I will be kicking off the video with right about now. So, kicking it off, we have Reborn #1, the Todd McFarlane variant. God Country #1. Peter Panzerfaust #1, which was all the rage when I first started watching YouTube vids back in the day, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, or comic book hauls anyway. Gru the Wanderer #1 by Pacific Comics. Savage Dragon #1, Newsstand Edition. Gen 13 #1, first time Gen 13 had their own miniseries. Fathom Preview, beautiful Michael Turner cover, and the first appearance of Aspen. G.I. Joe #2, the legendary, iconic Adam Hughes Baroness cover, at least in my opinion. Book I picked up not too long ago, Gen 13, what do they call it? The Baby Doll T variant, or the Victoria's Secrets variant? My favorite Red Sonja cover by Jenny Frison, Red Sonja #4. Very underrated book right here. Dark Horse presents fifth anniversary special, and this features the first appearance of Frank Miller's Sin City, or Frank Miller's first Sin City story. Say that 5 times fast. All right. So, as you'll probably be able to tell, some of the books that I just showed are definitely worth more than these two, but these have definite sentimental value, and I consider them both to be classics. We have on the left Miracle Man #1, and on the right Dreadstar by the legendary Jim Starlin #1. Both of these books were kind of like my very first beginnings of buying indie comics and finding my first comic book shop way back in the early to mid 1980s. So I did try a couple of indie comics before this, I believe, like Warp and Nexus and The Badger, John Sable Freelance. And these books are great. I mean, before the grim and gritty era of the 1980s, before the Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen changed everything, that change was already starting to permeate, especially on the indie scene. So Epic Comics was an imprint of Marvel at one point, and Dreadstar ended up, well, it's owned by Jim Starlin, just like an indie property, and it ended up going to another indie company called First Comics. So none of these are going to be in any particular order in the top 50. That was like number 48, well, number 50 and number 49. But I have them basically just all bunched up into like little groups. So other Miracle Man issues, Miracle Man #15, book that I wanted forever. And finally got it probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And number 16, probably one of the most radical comic books that I've ever read in my life. So, like I was saying, I have them all like bunched up into groups. I have them bunched up into like my favorite Valiant comics, Image comics, old school comics, and by some of them are by like just favorite characters. So, moving on along, this is like pretty much the old school section. Lone Wolf and Cub #1, and once we get down to the top 10, it will be pretty much in chronological order. Judge Dredd #1. Everyone should have a copy of this in their collection. First American appearance of Judge Dredd. Not his first overall appearance, but still pretty cool. Macross #1, which would be later on known as Robotech, the Macross Saga. Star Slayer #2. The first appearance of the Rocketeer. A lot of first appearances of great characters, and a lot of these keys are still under the radar of, I'd say, most of the current comic book buying populace. So I think a lot of these are underrated and totally attainable if you're a newer collector out there. USAGI YOJIMBO, number 1, first time he had his own solo title. Just be careful, look inside to make sure that it is a first printing. There'll be a couple of those cases in this video. Star Slayer number 10, first appearance of Grimjack. Dark Horse Presents number 10, the first appearance of the Mask. Destroyer Duck number 1, the first appearance of Gru. Ghost in the Shell number 1, classic manga, classic anime, and a major influence on the Matrix trilogy. Mage, the Hero Discovered. Oh, what number is this? I believe it's number 8. And this is the first this is the first time that there was a Grendel story in color. Solar Man of the Atom, number 3, first Toyo Harada. Rai, number 1. Shadow Man, number 1, first full appearance of Shadow Man. He made his cameo appearance, I believe, in Exo Man of War number 4, which I kind of, now that I think about it, forgot to dig out. Rai, number 0, first full appearance of Bloodshot. Exo Man of War, personal favorite of mine. Number 1, first appearance of Exo Man of War. And now we're into the alien stuff, which, as we all know, Disney has now acquired the rights to Aliens and Predator. So everything Alien and Predator oriented has kind of heated up as of lately. So we have Dark Horse Presents number 24, which I guess some would say was the first Alien appearance in comic book form. Others would say this is the origin of aliens in a comic book. Anywho, Aliens number 1, first time Aliens had their own comic. First print, once again, have to look inside to make sure. But for my money, the one that's really being overlooked is the Alien graphic novel from Heavy Metal. As far as I know, the first appearance of the aliens in a comic book form. When I was watching Vin Cruz, I think Top 50 Magazines, or one of his hauls, he had a Heavy Metal magazine that featured a preview predating this graphic novel. So I'm unaware if that contains original content or if it's just a preview featuring content from this graphic novel. If it is featuring just a preview of this graphic novel, I would still consider this to be the first full appearance of aliens in comics, and seriously underrated. Moving along. Gotta snag that Predator number 1 now. I picked this up maybe about a year or two ago for maybe like $5 or $10. I forget. High grade. Once again, look on the inside cover to make sure that it's a first print. All of these that I am showing, they are all first prints. This one, this is the only tie, but it's just a variant issue. So we have Dark Horse Presents number 36, which is the first time that Aliens and Predator locked horns in comics. And here is the A cover of that issue also. So I think that covers all the Aliens and Predator stuff. Let's move some of these aside. Alright, moving along. Just some classic Image. Witchblade number 1. Not the first appearance of Witchblade, but this is just one of those, like, I'd say top 5 iconic Michael Turner covers that you just have to have in your collection. Darkness number 0, or Witchblade number 10, whichever you prefer. This is the variant of that, I guess it is the variant. And this is the first appearance of the Darkness in comics. Little Spawn action. Spawn number 1, standard version. Spawn number 1, newsstand. And of course, Spawn number 9, first appearance of Angela. Have to have that. I was psyched to pick this up. This is Wildcats number 1, the gold foil edition, and it's autographed. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, I guess you can. By Jim Lee. And came with a certificate of authenticity. So, very cool. My only Jim Lee signature in my entire collection. Boys number 1. First appearance of the Boys, Butcher, all of them. Boys number 3. First appearance of the 7. It's dirty bastards. One of my all-time favorite indie characters, Hellboy. So here's Hellboy Seed of Destruction number 1, and first time that Hellboy had his own comic book. Beautifully written and illustrated by Mike Mignola. Seed of Destruction number 2, which features the first full appearance of the BPRD, Liz, and Abe Sapien. Hellboy, The Wild Hunt. This is the Dark Horse 100 Special Edition. It's funny. I just found out about this probably about a year ago, that Dark Horse 100 Special Edition variant program that they had, and I ended up picking up this one. I ended up picking up the Conan Cimmerian one, and of course, the one that I didn't pick up was the Clone Wars, which, holy regrets. Anyway, though, still really happy to have this. These are limited to 1,000 copies, which we all know now, but great stuff. Can't get enough Mike Mignola Hellboy in the collection. Alright, some TMNT action. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1 from the Archie Adventures. First appearance of Bebop and Krang in the comic book form. And this is the version of the Turtles that a whole generation relates to them as. Here's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1. This is the 4th printing, which features a very cool wraparound cover. And this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1 cover RIB, which is the fold-out version, which has basically the covers of all the individual Turtles all in one on this one. It just folds out. It's pretty freaking awesome. Alright, so down to... Oh, no, we're not down to the top 10 yet. Heavy Metal Magazine, number 1. Classic. Historic. Speaking of which, Nexus, number 1. This was like... This and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, number 1, were like the hot books on the scene when I first came on. Once I first came onto the comic book shop scene back in the old days of the 1980s. Oh. Alright, so now we are down to the top 10. Kicking it off, Grendel, number 1. This book was like an instant ghost in my area. I still haven't ever seen this in my area. I ended up picking this up online probably a couple of years ago. Very happy. Harbinger, number 1. Once again, super hot book from the 1990s. Make sure that the coupons are included. And one of the best early Valiant titles out there, bar none. John Byrne's Next Men, number 21. First Hellboy in color, of course. One of my favorite magazines in my collection. Warrior Magazine, number 1. This is the first original installment of Alan Moore's Miracle Man, and the first installment of V for Vendetta, also by, of course, the legendary Alan Moore. So, very important comic, very underrated magazine. Tough to come by because it is a British import, but love this book. Picked this book up probably about 7 years ago. Can't state enough good things about it. Alright, let's wrap it up. Comico Primer, number 2. Actually, let's get this out of the way. Let's get them all out of the way. Oops, failure. Comico Primer, number 2. First appearance of Grendel. Caliber Presents, number 1. First appearance of the Crow in comics. Malibu Sun, number 13. Probably my most valuable independent comic, and it's just a preview of Spawn number 1. But this is the negative variant. Speaking of Spawn, Spawn number 1, the black and white edition. just beautiful, and also a present for my brother back in the day. Well, a couple of years ago, actually, probably about 3 years ago. Great stuff. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. This is the third printing, and as close as I will probably ever get to the first printing. Been hunting that book for forever. And my #1 indie comic in my collection, San Diego Comic-Con Comics #2. First appearance of Hellboy. I know this book, a lot of people, including myself, were speculating on it hard right before the last Hellboy movie came out, but as is with most Hellboy fans, yeah, the movie wasn't good, but that doesn't change our opinion on the character. One of the best indie comic characters ever. One of the best comic book characters ever. So definitely in my top 100. So that's all I have for this time around. I will be back in a couple more weeks with my Star Wars collection spotlight, focusing in on pretty much everything I love about Star Wars. My favorite stories, my favorite keys, favorite covers, favorite variants, oddities, underrated comics, you name it. It's going to be in that video. So hopefully you can all join me. And until next time, thank you all for watching, liking, and subscribing. Stay safe out there. Thank you to all the essential workers for keeping us going. So thank you all. See ya. Bye.